What should the Jazz do at 5 and what should they do at 21? Are there any trades? All that and more straight ahead on Locked On Jazz with the Athletics' Tony Jones.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Jazz. I'm Leif Tulane. I'm excited to be back with you, filling in for David Locke on Locked On Jazz. And as most of you guys know by now, lifelong Jazz fan is credentialed NBA draft analyst for Locked On NBA Big Board, attendee the 2023 and 2024 NBA Draft Combine, Jazz broadcast assistant and statistician the past 4 seasons, lover of college hoops. So I'll make sure to get you guys what you need to know about your beloved Jazz and who they could be selecting. Thank you guys for making Locked On Jazz your first listen each and every day. And remember, Locked On Jazz is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube at Locked On Jazz, where the best way to help us grow is to comment anything below. And today's question is, what do you think about Tony's pitch and what the Jazz should do at 5 and the rumors that are swirling around? What do you believe and what is false in your opinion? So let us know in the comments below, and I'll engage with you guys there. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And today on the show, we've got a fun one. Tony and I are going to discuss the 5th pick, the 21st pick, talk about the rumors swirling around at 5 with the Ace Bailey falling down. Is VJ going to be gone? It's common Malawatch in the discussion for the Jazz. And then also talk about some trade rumors. So let's dive right in. We got tons to talk about. Tony Jones, kind enough to grace us on Locked On Jazz. Tony Jones, an incredible writer for The Athletic and an all-around great guy that I get to play some hoops with occasionally. Tony, I got to ask you, your first question right here. The Jazz are at 5. They wanted 1, they wanted 2, they wanted 3, they wanted 4. But some of the guys that they thought would be there at 3 and 4 may be there at 5. What do you make of all this, like, windstorm of rumors of saying a guy like Ace could be there at 7 and a guy like VJ is the likely pick at 3 when it all felt pretty certain it was going to be 1, 2, and 3, Cooper, Rutgers.
I don't think the league has had that opinion for a long time. I mean, the stuff with Ace is real. He's been a polarizing figure for decision makers around the league for, months now. And, I think the best way to describe the whole thing with Ace right now is that GMs are scared to take him, petrified to draft him, and they're petrified to pass up on him because they might draft him and he might turn into Cam Reddish, and they might pass up on him and he might turn into Tracy McGrady. It's definitely one of those polarizing things. He's definitely this year's Cam Whitmore, even though he's a lot more talented than Cam is, which makes it even more polarizing and makes the subject even more interesting. But I think Ace's ceiling is to Philadelphia at 3. And, I could see a scenario where he falls all the way into the latter stages of the top 10. So, it makes it really interesting. It makes a really interesting talk. But, this is not just talk with him. This is not just drafting your usual draft narrative with him. The polarization of Ace Bailey is as real as it gets.
So with that said, the Jazz hold the 5th pick and certainly could be in the mix for Ace Bailey. If Tony Jones was the guy in charge of making this pick for the Utah Jazz, what is the best case scenario for the Jazz? And also, if Ace is there at 5, whether that is the answer or not, would you take him based on what you feel about him?
I think the best case scenario with the Jazz would probably be, well, not probably. The best case scenario with the Jazz, Tre Johnson or VJ Edgecombe is.
Ooh, really? I'm all in on Tre. I'm not very high on VJ.
Well, the intel on VJ that, I've heard from everybody around the league is wonderful. Like, people around the league think he's as hard a worker as almost anybody in the draft, in that, they're betting on VJ Edgecombe, the person, to get VJ Edgecombe, the basketball player, to his ceiling. And that's why you hear VJ um, so so high in talks in terms of Philadelphia. And right now, I believe VJ has a floor. Like, I think VJ Edgecombe's floor is at 4. I think that he's Charlotte's preferred pick. GMs really, 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 really have loved his interviews and have loved the pre-draft process with him, and they're willing to bet on the athleticism. They're willing to bet on the defense, and they're willing to bet on VJ, the person, uh, being able to improve the swing skills, like the handle, in the dribbling and the shooting. So that being said, yeah, Tre Johnson for me is the guy that I think would be best case scenario falls to the Jazz, which means one of Ace or Khan goes to 3 to Philly, and then VJ goes 4, or VJ goes 3 to Philly, Khan goes 4 to Charlotte, and then Tre Johnson is there for the Jazz at 5. I think Tre Johnson is maybe as well-rounded an offensive talent as there is in this draft. To me, he reminds me of a young Devin Booker in the way he can play on or off the ball. He's an underrated passer. He's got absolutely tremendous footwork. And he's a guy that can run pick and roll. He's a weapon shooter on the move or in the standstill. There's just a lot of ways that a team can use Tre Johnson offensively, and I think that he's a guy that has a chance to be an offensive engine in this league.
See, I'm right there with you. I compared him not to the exact player that SGA is, but in the sense that he follows a similar development path. It's a 2-guard skill set, that he's such a good scorer, and now all of a sudden his scoring takes him to a level where he creates advantages, 4-on-3s, 5-on-4s, right. And he creates off of a ball screen. He snakes the dribble, and he's got two sets of eyes on him at all times, and he finds the open player, not because he's an innately amazing passer, but because he's vastly underrated at passing, and he's already decent at it. Everyone acts like he's Cam Thomas, Jamal Crawford, and I think he can pass, especially with spacing. And I think he's the best shooter in the draft that will go in the first round. I think Kobe Brea is a better shooter, and he's an anomaly of a shooter. And Tre Johnson shoots 55% off the ball. And then with the ball in his hands, he still was able to score unbelievably difficult ones. So I'm with you. Tre Johnson's my best case scenario. I have him number 3 on my board. Follow up to what you were saying about Devin Booker. I agree there. But how likely is it that Tre Johnson is not picked 3rd or 4th? You mentioned that VJ might be the favorite at 3 and is the favorite at 4, if I'm interpreting what you're saying correctly. But how likely is it that Tre is not taken with the other pick, 3rd or 4th?
Well, I think the wild card in that is Conconnipple. I mean, He's got fans at 3, at 4, and at 5. He's in the mix in all 3 spots. And, he's got fans in Philadelphia. I don't know that he's the favorite in Philly. I think VJ is probably the favorite in Philly if I had to tag a favorite right now. VJ's definitely, according to everybody I talk to around the league, VJ's pretty solidly the favorite at 4. But if VJ goes 3, then all of a sudden Charlotte is picking between Conconnipple, Tre Johnson, and possibly Ace Bailey. And if Charlotte picks Conconnipple, then obviously Tre Johnson is available at 5. And the Jazz have had Tre Johnson in for a workout. They like the workout. He was good in it. I think that I don't know that the Jazz view him as a perfect prospect, but I think that he has enough fans that if he fell to 5, that I think that he would be the pick there.
Do you think that if Ace Bailey and Tre Johnson are both on the board, Tre Johnson's the pick?
Oh, absolutely.
And let's go to the Duke side of things. You've mentioned in Twitter reports that Common Malawatch, even if Walker Kessler is on the roster, it has some fans in the front office and would be someone in the contention. And same with Conconnipple. So what is the pitch for Jazz fans that are, like myself, really want a star here? That's my gripe with taking some of these players that I don't foresee superstar upside. So what's the pitch for Conconnipple or Common Malawatch over the flashier pick of Tre Johnson or Ace Bailey?
Well, I don't think Malawach would go over Tre Johnson. I just don't think that he's higher on Utah's board than Tre. I'm not sure that he would go over Jeremiah Fears. I'm not sure he would go over Con Kneppel. But let's just say something happens and, the Jazz trip and fall, slip on a banana, and come on, Malawach is number 1 on their board at number 5. So what's the reason for them to pick? Number one, my sources tell me that Malawach, I said on Twitter that Malawach worked out for the Jazz. My sources tell me that workout went really well. He was very impressive. He shot the ball extremely well in the workout. But the reason to potentially draft Malawach would be to reset the timeline. And what I mean by resetting the timeline is the Jazz have to pay Walker Kessler, or they have to decide whether they want to pay Walker Kessler this summer. He's due for, he's eligible for the rookie extension. The Jazz could decide not to pay that extension and let him to get to restricted free agency next year. In that case, I think things could get, expensive for them. But they have to, sit down with Walker's people, and they have to figure out, what's a number that's good for both sides. If you draft Malawach, then all of a sudden you reset that timeline, because then all of a sudden, if you draft Malawach, you're probably going to look into trading Walker Kessler. So, that's probably the reason. My sense of the whole thing is that Malawach is not at the top of that leaderboard at 5. Like I said, Tre Johnson would be before him. I think Jeremiah Fears would be before him. I think Ace Baylor would be before him, but I'm not certain about that. And Con Kneppel would be in that mix as well. Kneppel and Fears both have real fans within the Jazz. Kneppel, similar to VJ, he is interviewed extremely well. He has shown himself to be an extremely mature human being during this draft process. And I think that, Philadelphia, Charlotte, and the Jazz have really liked, the professionalism that he's shown through the draft process. And, Kneppel does some things that are really unique. He plays off of 2 feet better than any prospect that I've seen in the draft since Jalen Brunson.
Do you want to hear my nickname for him?
What?
Jay Wright's wet dream.
There we go. See, we always align on basketball thoughts.
Yeah,
and,
that's what I've called him since November, because he jump stops all the time.
But let's talk. Yeah.
Let's talk Con Kneppel a little bit, and then some rumors coming up at the next segment. Got to hit a break here. Come back with some more Con Kneppel breakdown, and then some rumors about trading up or down with picks, and hit the 21st pick. I wish we had more time, because Tony and I can talk all day, but we also got to tell you about some picks at 21, because I promised it yesterday as well. So we'll hit that and a lot more coming up on Locked On Jazz. So Olipop is the new kind of soda made for people who love the classic taste of soda but want something that supports their health. With just 2 to 5 grams of sugar and 9 grams of prebiotic fiber in every can, Olipop is the reimagining soda in a way that's better for your gut. Traditional sodas are loaded with sugar, like 39 grams in Coke or 44 in Orange Fanta, and Olipop flips that script with just a fraction of the sugar. No artificial sweeteners and a gut-friendly ingredients like OliSmart, a blend shown to support digestive and overall health. It's soda that tastes like the real thing, but actually does something good for your body. So what flavor is, because Olipop has maybe Dr. Goodwin, which is their Dr. Pepper, or my personal favorite, root beer, which is I've got right here. You can get all of the classic soda taste for so much better. And there's an app here. So if you get better alternatives, So how cool is that? That all can give you about a 30 just can. So get a free can, just buy 8 cans in the store and they'll reimburse you for one. Head to drinkolipop.com/LockedOnNBA to claim your free can and find Olipop near you. That's drinkolipop.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, Tony, we're back here. And Con Knipple is an interesting player because I think he's got a high floor, don't necessarily see the same upside. And like you mentioned, he's one of the best off 2 feet. His balance is great. He's a very good shooter. What would make Jazz fans stomach the pick? I know they wanted the Cooper flag. They finally were bad enough to be in the sweepstakes for the number 1 pick. But now you're getting a guy that most don't see an all-star. What would be the reason that you could say Jazz fans be excited about this if they were to take Con Knipple?
Well, they would get a Duke freshman.
Yeah, that was what my premise was a couple days ago on the show.
Con Knipple, to me, I think, what he would bring to the roster is a certain level of maturity at his age. This is not to say that there's not maturity on the roster, but you can't have enough maturity on a roster. So that, and I think that it remains to be seen if he's going to be a 3-level scorer, because I believe that he'll be able to score from 3-point range. Obviously, I believe that he'll be able to get into the mid range and score there. It remains to be seen whether he'll be able to score at the basket. But similar to Tre, I think he can create basketball advantages, even against more athletic guys. And the thing with Knipple, people have been saying, well, he's not athletic. Once he gets to certain level, this is going to stop. Once he gets to a certain level, this is going to stop. They said that about him in high school. Once, when he was at Wisconsin, they said, yeah, he can't go to the top 100 camp and do the same thing that he does to the kids in Wisconsin. Well, he went to the top 100 camp and did the same things that he did to the kids in Wisconsin. That made him a national recruit. Well, he can't go to Duke and do that in the ACC. Well, he went to the Duke and he did that in the ACC. So he's used to figuring out a way to still be a star level player with every jump, every leap that he's made, that he makes in competition. So I'm not really worried about the perceived lack of athleticism and whether or not that it can translate to the NBA. The kid knows how to play. He's 6'6". I believe that he's a 2 guard in this league, which gives him good size. And the shooting, the ball handling, he's a really, really good passer. He's really smart off the ball. He's a really knockdown shooter. And, I think that he's going to be able to develop a post-up game from the 2 guard spot. I believe he's a better defender in isolation that people give him credit for. He's not Cason Wallace and he's not Lou Dort, but he's going to stay in front of guys. I truly believe that he can be a Desmond Bane level of player, which is fringe all-star type, very strong number 3, number 2 on a playoff team type. And if you're a Jazz fan, the question is, can you live with that in a vacuum? Because that in a vacuum, that's probably worth the 5th pick.
If we knew the appeal of getting the dude is so strong when you're in the top 5.
But if you told me that Desmond Bane was the number 5 pick of an NBA draft, knowing, obviously he wasn't, but if you told me that this is the career that he had and this is Desmond Bane, he's going number 5 in his class, you're going to take that more often than not, because that is a very good player. And if Con Knipple turns into that, that's a very good player. The question for Jazz fans is, did we lose 65 games to draft Desmond Bane? And that's the question that Jazz fans are going to have to reconcile and answer for themselves.
I mean, you sold me more than I was sold on Khan, and I watched tons of Khan, and I like him as a player. Was not the guy that I'd like the Jazz to take because, like you said, as a Jazz fan, if you're going to lose 65 games and you're going to manipulate lineups the way they had, you got to find a chance of getting the start, and that's why I'm all in on Tre Johnson. But speaking of late draft success, Desmond Bane was the 30th pick and has been excellent. The Jazz have the 21st pick. I promised Jazz fans I'd discuss this. So what are your favorite options that you think could conceivably be there at 21? Because I've given a few, but there's some people who don't think they're going to be there. There's some that think, oh, I'm reaching for others. So what are your preferred options for the Jazz at 21?
Well, there are so many options there that I think that somebody's going to be there that shouldn't be there.
I agree.
I think that there's a chance that the Jazz wake up at 21 and Asa Newell is still there for some reason. He just got squeezed. Maybe Rasheer Fleming is there. I love Rasheer Fleming. That's the guy that I hope is there. I don't think that Rasheer Fleming is going to be there, but that's the guy that I hope is going to be there.
And for reference, Rasheer Fleming is a guy who played – he's 6'9", 240, played at St. Joe's, scored 15 a game, 9.5 boards, and has a 7'5" wingspan and shot 39% from three. The knock on him as to why he could be there, for those listening, is that he's older in doing so. It's not like he's a freshman doing so, or he'd be a lottery pick, guaranteed. Still could be. My favorite guy that I've had in the class in that kind of wing range has been Carter Bryant for a while. I don't think he's going to be there. Cedric Howard was another one I felt like I identified early, and I don't think he's going to be there. So now the two that I've kind of focused on have been Drake Powell and Will Riley. And I think they're there for different reasons. Will Riley is super slender, 6'9", doesn't shoot it great per the percentages, but I think will be a good shooter, was a 90th percentile isolation guy as a freshman, ran a bunch of pick and rolls, and Drake Powell's the best athlete in the draft. And he, I think defensively, is somewhere in between a Christian Brown and Ochai Agbaji. That's who he kind of reminds me of as a freshman. And those guys came out as upperclassmen. So what do you make of those guys? Or anyone else stand out?
Well, Nick Clifford stands out as well. And I think Nick Clifford is a favorite, is definitely a favorite of mine. But a lot like Rasheer Fleming, Nick Clifford is older. He's been around for a while, but he can dribble, pass, and shoot. And I think that this Jazz roster desperately needs guys who can dribble, pass, and shoot, and also defend like Nick Clifford does, and defend with size. So let's get that out of the way. Will Riley, for me, my hot take is that he was the best freshman on his team this year.
Over Kasparas Jakučionis.
I believe he was the best freshman on his team this year. Like you said, it's hard to find 6'9" guys who can dribble, and Will Riley can dribble. And I believe that he can pass, and I believe that he will be able to shoot. He's going to have to fall in love with the weight room. He's very slender. He's going to be, he's kind of Cody Williams slender at this point. And, people are going to be able to knock him off of his path a lot. But if he hits, Will Riley's upside is tremendous. There's a pathway to us looking up in 5 years and saying something like, how the hell did Will Riley last to the 20s?
So here's a philosophical question for you, Tony. And I think where I'm going to go with this. When you draft at 20, oftentimes people have said you swing for the fences and try to get someone, because most of the time when you're in the 20s, you're taking a guy to help a roster that's already really good. Now with the new CBA, is there any legitimacy to trying to choose older players so that you can have good players ready to go? But the Jazz aren't one of those good teams, so do they go with the swing?
Well, the Jazz aren't one of those good teams. They have to go with a swing. The reason, and the fact that they have to go with a swing, is the reason to pick Ace Bailey at 5, right?
You're reading my mind. That was my next question.
Because Ace Bailey has superstar upside, point blank. Yeah. Now he has out of the league in 3 years of a floor, but he's got a super duper star upside. And if you're the Jazz, and if you're a Jazz fan and you lost 65 games and you manipulated lineups, you want somebody that has a superstar outcome. So even at 21, Will Riley fits because he fits that. But I believe that this Jazz roster really needs basketball players, and they really need smart basketball players. And that's why I really like Nick Clifford there, because he's a smart basketball player.
Yep.
And he just knows how to play basketball. Rasheer Fleming, he's a smart basketball player, and he knows how to play basketball. He's like a 23-year-old version of Taylor Hendricks to me.
That's my exact comp for Rasheer Fleming.
Yeah.
I think they're very similar.
Yeah, they're very similar. And for me, you can't have enough Taylor Hendricks on your roster. That's a winning basketball player. Like, out of all of the young guys that the Jazz have, I'm the highest right now on Taylor Hendricks, provided he comes back from the broken leg and he goes back to being Taylor Hendricks.
Yep.
But you can't have enough of those. That's why I like him. I mean, what if Igor Demin, falls to number 21? Do they look at Nolan Traore at 21?
I like that idea.
Because, with Traore, I think the Jazz lack guys who can get into the paint off the dribble, and Nolan Traore can get a paint touch off the dribble almost at will. What if Newell falls and then all of a sudden, he's there at 21? Do you look at Danny Wolf at 21, knowing how well Kyle Filipowski?
If you already have Flip, I don't see it. I think there. If you have Flip already, I don't see going for Wolf. I think many.
If you can have two Flips, and one in power forward and one in center,
you might give up 200 points a game.
You might, but you might score 201.
Okay, that's fair. One other guy that I think is interesting would be Liam McNeely, who at times has been a top 10 guy and then has fallen and seemingly, and I think he could be there. So my contention is that 21, I think the Jazz come away with a good player and where the draft is heading, whereas 5 is the one I'm more scared of, because I think there is the need for taking a swing for the fences, the grand slam swing for Ace, or is it hit a home run to the opposite field with Tre Johnson that could be great, or do you go for the safe double in Con Knipple or someone in that regard? So I feel pretty confident at 21. Coming up next, we're going to talk about the other way to get a superstar, or just some very important players. That's realistic trades that the Jazz could make. We got that and a lot more ahead with myself and Tony Jones on Locked On Jazz. There's just nothing like the NBA playoffs. The intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their minds. It's the kind of atmosphere you must experience live, and boy, do I miss going to Jazz games in the playoffs. And this year's matchups have already delivered. So if you want in, Game Time makes it fast and easy to get seats. Even for the biggest playoff games, prices on the app actually drop closer to tip-off. And with killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees, Game Time is a total game changer. I was just perusing the app, and Zone Deals were offering 10% off exclusive Zone Deals for the FIFA Club World Cup matchups. And I can tell you guys how important it is to see what you're going to see. And so I went to the U.S. Open. I had different stadiums, Arthur Ashe, Louis Armstrong, and I want to watch the tennis action and make sure nothing obscures my view. And Game Time allowed me exactly that. And also, if you're into the NFL, Game Time makes scoring NFL tickets just as easy. You'll find great seats for as low as $100 thanks to exclusive discounts. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. So download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to Locked On Jazz. Leaf Tulane and Tony Jones taking you through some realistic trade options. We talked a little bit to Andy Larson on the previous episode on what could happen for the Utah Jazz that's not draft related. Are there draft trades the Jazz make? Are there targets the Jazz are looking at that are already good NBA players that they want to get in the draft in some time, but already could have the chance? So, Tony, I just turn it over to you. What is the vibe around the Jazz right now in terms of the trade market? Because I think because of the new CBA, more teams are going to be more experimental and make trades that could turn out to be short-sighted or could turn out to look ingenious down the road.
Well, right now, I mean, I'm told that nothing's close. The Jazz are taking calls. They're doing due diligence. I think it's going to come down to what's available and kind of what shakes out on the market, and whether the Jazz see if, there's an opportunity. I believe if they had gotten Cooper Flag, I believe that they would have pivoted towards trying to make a trade towards a high impact veteran, because if you have Cooper Flag, then all of a sudden that speeds up your timeline. Um, but right now I think they're, kind of on the fence of whether they want to go and try to take a high impact swing, or whether they want to keep going young. I believe that their best course of action right now, just for this year, is to go young and try to make sure that they keep their draft pick next year, because I believe that the 2026 draft has a chance to be on par with the 2003 draft, the 1996 draft, the 1984 draft, in terms of potential best drafts of all time. And I think that the Jazz want and need to be a part of that draft class. So it's going to come down to what the Jazz do in the next 2 to 3 weeks, and they can go a way of saying, hey, we have Lauri Markkanen, let's go and try to trade for a high impact veteran to come and play with Lauri Markkanen. Or they can say, hey, we have this draft pick that we owe to Oklahoma City Thunder, and we need to be in that protected range because we need one of those guys from the 2026 class. So it's going to be really fascinating to see which way the Jazz go.
I don't think it's impossible that the Jazz could make a trade for an impact player, maybe not the superstar, and still be within the top 8, because you look at the West, there's 12 teams. I think even I made the idea of Jaren Jackson Jr. after Bane got traded, and maybe Memphis is willing to trade more players. Jaren Jackson Jr. has been an all-NBA guy. He's won Defensive Player of the Year. You put him in a lineup with Lowry and Kessler, that's a really good team. But I still looked at all the teams, and I thought maybe there's 12 better teams in the West. So you do the math there, and that puts him in contention to keep that pick. So is there any belief that a guy like Jaren Jackson Jr. or a Trey Murphy, guys like that I think are floated on the market, that are hot commodities, end up in Salt Lake, or am I just dreaming?
I think that there's a chance that they take calls on those. And, not saying Jaren Jackson Jr. or Trey Murphy specifically. I know that the entire league likes Trey Murphy. And I think New Orleans knows that as well.
Tony. They're copying me. He hit 6 threes against Taos in his first game at Virginia. That was my guy.
When Trey Murphy was coming out in that draft, I wanted the Jazz to get him so badly.
You're telling me.
And I remember talking, to members of the front office, and they were like, yeah, we want him too, Tony, but yeah, he's going to be gone well before we're picking. Yeah. So, he's just a ridiculously versatile and good player. And I believe that he's durability away from becoming an all-star. I think the litmus test for me is, what do the Jazz do at point guard? Because right now, one of the biggest reasons why they're the 13th or 14th, 15th best team in the West is because of point guard play. And if they go out and they get a high impact veteran at point guard, then that's going to tell you exactly, what they want to do either way. And, if they roll with Isaiah Collier and keep trying to develop him, then, that's going to tell you some things as well. I think that, the Jazz have decent pieces other places, right? Like, you have Lowry, so that's, an all-star level forward. You have Walker Kessler, he's, to me, I think that he can one day be a Defensive Player of the Year candidate at the 5 spot. But every other spot is like really in flux. So what do they do with those other three spots on the floor, and how do they fill the gaps, and how do they fill the roster?
I'm with you. So I'll put two big name guys that I think the Jazz could be interested in, but not to make them immediately better, but could help in the long run. Damian Lillard and Jrue Holiday are either options because they have massive contracts. Dame obviously would miss the season with an Achilles. Jrue is maybe on the way out because the Celtics have some money making decisions to say, okay, who's going to stay on this team and what nucleus are we going to create and keep? Is there any world the Jazz have either on their roster at the start of this upcoming season?
I mean, I haven't heard those names, but obviously a couple of years ago, the Jazz made a really strong play for Jrue Holiday.
Yep.
They had a trade lined up for him. They had a really strong offer lined up for him. And, politics stopped that one.
Yeah.
Obviously the Jazz are not averse to having Jrue Holiday on the roster. I haven't heard his name come up. I haven't really heard anybody's name come up in terms of veterans, but what I have, talking to the Jazz, the definitive thing that we know is that, they're open to anything at this point. They're open to making a high impact trade swing, and they're open to going young. It just depends on, what's available on the market and, what the opportunities present themselves for them. I think that, their immediate focus is trying to figure out what to do at 5. And there's some pressure there, right?
Yep.
Because they haven't picked in the top 5 since 2014. That top 5 pick turned out not to be a great pick. That was Dante Exum. They have had lottery picks for going on 3 years now, and they haven't really hit on any of those lottery picks. Like let's keep it real. They haven't hit on any of them. They need to hit on this pick. No matter what they do, whether they make a trade, whether they make a trade up, whether they make a trade down, whatever they do, whatever decision that they make, that decision needs to age well over time.
Yep.
So I think there's significant pressure on Austin Ainge and Danny Ainge and Justin Zanuck to really get this draft correct. Now they've gotten the drafts correct in their later picks. Like they picked Bryce Sensabaugh. He's turned out to be a rotation level player. They picked Isaiah Collier. He's turning out to be a rotation level player. They picked Kyle Filipowski and Keontae George. Those guys are rotation level players, but they haven't gotten a star, and they need a star level talent on this roster to build around.
Which is why I believe this is the year the Jazz have to take a guy who can be an all-star and can be even more than that, the franchise changer, which is why I'll be disappointed if it's not someone named Tre Johnson or Ace Bailey. So my final question to you, Tony, I could talk to you for hours, and perhaps we'll have to after, but we gotta stay in the format here. What is the most likely outcome? So on a week from today, when we're recording, so 6 days from when everyone listens, and the Jazz are picking number 5, your expectation is the Jazz select whom?
So I believe that Cooper Flag is going number 1. Dylan Harper is going number 2. I believe that VJ Edgecombe goes number 3. And then I believe that that's where the draft starts. And so then, I believe that Charlotte picks between Colin Knueppel or Tre Johnson. And then if it's Colin Knueppel, then the Jazz should run to the podium and take Tre Johnson. If it's Tre Johnson, then I believe that the Jazz are picking between Colin Knueppel, Ace Bailey, and Jeremiah Fears. Those 3.
Any one of them stand out?
And I just don't know how that's going to go. I just don't know how that's going to go.
I'll put it out there. I would take Ace Bailey if I'm the Jazz. I do a lot of scouting. I would take Ace there. My
personal opinion, I would take Ace Bailey let's break it down. I would take Ace Bailey. I think Colin Knueppel's a better player than Ace Bailey now. I believe that Jeremiah Fears is positively dynamic. I do not believe that you can win with his archetype, or I believe that it's extremely difficult to win with his archetype, which kind of knocks him down a couple of notches for me. And so I'm just going to go ahead and bet on the 6'9" shooting guard, who's probably the second best shot maker in the draft behind Tre Johnson. And I'm going to put him, Ace has some real flags, but I'm just going to put him in a really good basketball environment. I'm going to nurture him, and I'm going to bet on my development, and I'm going to bet that I can develop him into an all-NBA level player. So Ace Bailey would be.
I'm on board. We're in lockstep. I was going to say, speak that one to existence for me, Tony, because I'd be delighted. But thank you for your time. I wish we could keep you longer. Thank you guys, the listeners, for making Locked On Jazz your first listen today. And for your second listen, check out the Locked On 2025 NBA Mock Draft, a 5-episode series, the most comprehensive NBA draft analysis from NBA experts to college experts and NBA draft experts. So find the 2025 Locked On NBA Mock Draft on NBA Big Board and Locked On NBA on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. And thank you guys for tuning in. And let us know if you agree. Would you take Ace? Would you take Tre? What do you want to do? And thank you once again to Tony. And we'll be back tomorrow with more NBA draft breakdowns for my final episode with you this week.